Last year we saw 6 superhero movies released in theaters, a runaway hit in Luke Cage, and an unprecedented number of comic book hero-themed and inspired series on network television. It truly is an awesome time to be alive if you are a nerd, as one is pretty much spoiled for choices. And yet for the most part I feel that the various production companies have played it safe in regards to what properties have been adapted. Oh sure, Suicide Squad was comparatively unusual, but we started off the year with Batman v Superman from Warner Brothers, and all I'm seeing from here on out from that company is them trying vainly to copy Disney's business model, and quite likely failing. What I was thinking was I would like to see someone go after the more obscure properties, comic books that are a little more outside the long box, if you know what I mean. And the reason why I titled these videos Dear Netflix is one, I'd like to see them produced as a series and not movies, so you can get a better overall story out of them. 2, Netflix has been nailing it with their programming, and because they aren't a television network, they do have a bit more latitude regarding content. And finally, it took 8 years and a miracle for Fox to let Ryan Reynolds produce Deadpool. I doubt if most execs at the major motion picture companies are going to take another chance like that. So, if any of the following suggestions would find a worthy home, I think it would be Netflix. What are these properties? Let's look. Astro City is an anthology series taking place in a fictional metropolis full of superheroes and villains, as well as normal people who live in their shadow, yet often have their own moments to shine. Writer-creator Kurt Busiek is not shy about using heroic archetypes. His Samaritan is obviously a Superman analog, for example. But it's the unique spins he places on many of the characters, such as Winged Victory and the Confessor, that make them in some cases more interesting than the characters they are inspired by, at least in my humble opinion. Perhaps part of that is because Astro City, unlike most mainstream comics, allows their characters to age, so we see the effects of the passage of time both on the city, its inhabitants, and its protectors. One example is a story where smart-ass vigilante Crackerjack is forced to confront the fact that he is growing old, and being just a normal guy in spandex, he grows steadily more desperate to find an edge to keep him in the game, while at the same time his partner Quarrel's origin is told, and she contemplates either retirement or slapping on a suit of powered armor to stay active. Over the years, Astro City's stories have ranged from a neo-noir tale of a burnt-out supervillain named Steeljack getting out of jail and trying to stay out of trouble but being drawn into a web of intrigue, to where a sentient gorilla just wants to play drums in a rock and roll band, to a lawyer being called on to handle a court case among cosmic beings, and a young man's pursuit to become a hero's sidekick. The stories are fun, touching, action-packed, and wildly imaginative. While I think that perhaps the anthology setting may put off some fans, I think the quality of the stories would win them over. And it would not be so hard to have subplots carry through a season, such as Confessor and Choirboy's fight against shape-changing aliens infiltrating Astro City, for example, which was published years before Marvel's Secret Invasion, and done much better in my humble opinion. Another potential drawback might be the sheer scope of the universe. Busiek and artists Brent Anderson and Alex Ross might be too much for any production company to handle within the constraints of a reasonable budget. But since Netflix has already entered the animated series market, that might be a way for them to go with this property. Of all the series mentioned in these videos, by far Astro City is the one I would like to see produced most. When it comes to the funny books, on average, sex and violence, real, bloody, gory violence, is usually kept to a minimum. It's the PG-13 philosophy where you can have just enough violence to entertain teenagers, but not too much to upset their parents, and I have no problem with that. However, sometimes some rated R ultra violence would be nice, and that's where Invincible comes in. Mark Grayson is the son of Nolan Grayson, also known as Omni-Man, the world's most powerful superhero. But Omni-Man has a dark secret, and when Mark's inherent powers kick in and he adopts the identity of Invincible, that secret will come to haunt him. Invincible is not for the faint of heart. While sometimes the series is very lighthearted, it can shift with mind-jarring suddenness to the most explicitly vicious comic you ever had the squeamish pleasure to look upon. There are beheadings, disembowelments, dismemberments, in one case a rape. So if you have a weak stomach, then Invincible is definitely not the comic for you. On the other hand, there is the aforementioned lightheartedness. Mark Grayson is a sympathetic hero surrounded by a wonderful cast of characters, from his mother to his girlfriend Adam Eve, not to mention the diverse world of heroes that writer Robert Kirkman and artist Cory Walker have created. Their universe of characters surpassed only by Kurt Busiek's Astro City and DC and Marvel Comics. when you consider the field coming in fourth ain't so bad. Robert Kirkman is a very talented and creative writer with his own style. A style soaked in blood and gore, it seems, when you take in his other property, The Walking Dead, into consideration. And while the ultraviolence is not always to my taste, Invincible is an excellent property ripe for a television show. What if the Kardashians had superpowers? That is more or less the concept behind Noble Causes, which, to be fair, contains more sympathetic characters than the fame-obsessed clan that has haunted social media for the past decade or so. Race Noble is the nicest, most popular member of the Noble clan, which consists of his sorceress mother Gaia, his super genius inventor father Doc, kid sister Zephyr, and older brother Rusty, along with half-brother and black sheep of the family, Frost. Race has found the love of his life. The problem? She's a bookstore owner, and a normal woman with no powers whatsoever. How are the new in-laws going to handle her? How is she going to cope with the insane world she's been thrown into? The story of Race and Liz is just the first arc and a small part of the overall story. Noble Causes plays like a superheroic soap opera, and writer Jay Faber does a wonderful job making even the most selfish and unlikable characters interesting, and in some cases even sympathetic. That's not to say Noble Causes is some Brian Michael Bendis comic where everybody does nothing but talk page after page. Faber does a wonderful job bringing the action as well. What Noble Causes has going for it, really, is the comparatively different tone that, rather than it being about supervillains and superheroes fighting, and to be fair, there's plenty of that, the focus is instead on personal struggles. Some might find it boring, but I found it a refreshing change from the meat and potatoes of standard superhero fare. Not being a fan of soap operas, I was nevertheless fascinated by the conflicts and interactions Faber introduced. In a field populated with superhero shows, a concept like this might be a serious standout. And while we're on the subject of Jay Faber, let's take a look at his other work. Imagine if Superman died. And imagine if Lois Lane discovered the man she loved had turned out to be a complete dog, sleeping with numerous women over the years. And imagine if Lois Lane, in order to safeguard Metropolis, tracked down Superman's 5 illegitimate children and exposed them to a gas that gave each of them one of his powers. That's Dynamo 5. Captain Dynamo is dead, and it's up to his 5 kids to unite to protect Tower City. Dynamo 5 shares some of the tone of Faber's other comic, Noble Causes, in that there is the family dynamic at its heart. How do these 5 strangers deal with the fact that they now have 4 brothers and sisters? How will their own families react to the knowledge of one of their parents was unfaithful? Will the public accept this new team as the city's new defenders, and are the 5 up to the challenge? While comics having a family dynamic are nothing new, Fantastic Four, Power Pack, and the aforementioned Noble Causes are fine examples, I think Dynamo 5 brought a very unique spin to the table. Like Noble Causes, its hook could garner a lot of interest in an audience that might have grown jaded with so many superhero shows to watch. When nerds think of J. Michael Straczynski, the sci-fi series Babylon 5 normally comes to mind. But JMS had a very impressive career as a comic book writer, with a solid run on Spider-Man, resurrecting the Squadron Supreme property, his horror book Midnight Nation, and Rising Stars. The premise of the latter comic is a group of women in a small town are exposed to a strange radiation that gives their newborn children unique abilities, a shared power that, when one dies, is transferred to the others. When they are adults, these men and women pursue their own lives until someone starts killing them, one of their own, someone who wants that power for themselves. Rising Stars was a fantastic series, perhaps in part because JMS had in mind a beginning, a middle, and a definite end. It is a tight story with interesting characters, exploring the idea of a group of people who have powers, but who don't always want to use them to fight crime or be criminals. In many cases, they just want to be left alone, to ignore their unique abilities altogether and lead quiet, normal lives. Of course, if they were allowed to do that, then it would be one hell of a boring comic, now wouldn't it? The relationship between the various superpowered beings, the unique lives each of them lead, and their trials as they confront one another is a compelling story, one that could easily be played out over a couple seasons. People go on and on about Alan Moore's Watchmen, and V for Vendetta, or The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, But I have a soft spot in my heart for top 10. Imagine a huge metropolis full of extraordinary beings, men, women, and even children with superpowers, magical abilities, amazing weapons and gadgets. Now imagine being a cop in such a city. Top 10 felt much like a police procedural, like the classic Hill Street Blues, NYPD Blue, or Chicago PD, following the lives of police detectives and beat cops alike as they attempted to keep law and order from out of the 10th precinct. Moore did an excellent job in juggling personal drama along with the gritty feel of a cop show with a superheroic twist, like the detectives investigating the murders of the Norse god Balder, or dealing with a schizophrenic telekinetic who thinks he's Santa Claus. Moore also liked to take shots at superhero tropes, such as the institution of teen sidekicks and unsupervised superhero teams who think they're above the law. For people who love their traditional comics a little too much, Top 10 might not be to their taste. If there is any drawback to adapting Top 10 to a live-action or animated series, it's not just the potential budget, but the sight gags. One of the joys of reading the comic were all the inside jokes sprinkled throughout the series. They were so enjoyable a person could not help but reread the comic again and again to see all the gags artist Gene Ha and Xander Cannon produced. Then again, in this day and age where you can almost always watch a show over and over again, perhaps a series that encourages that is a good idea. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please tune in next time when I take a look at some more properties, this time of a less superhero-y nature, and hopefully that'll be out in the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much, and have a good one. Bye-bye.